So, thinking about your thinking. It's interesting to contemplate the nature of your learning. You've been going to school now for many years, and it's almost like every year someone just adds another layer of information or knowledge on top of the previous layer. And at some point, we say, gee, we think you've got enough layers there. Go off and do something with it, yeah? That's sort of one way to think about learning. That we just accumulate these layers over a period of time and then we're apparently okay to go and do something with it. Another way to think about learning, which is the way that I'm encouraging you in this unit, is to actually acknowledge the layers that you've been accumulating and also the assumptions that have been built within those layers, and also the fact that you're in there. You've been attracted to certain layers and you've been not that interested in other areas, right? I'm interested in you actually going inside the layers rather than looking at adding another layer, all right? In fact, there is another layer that can be added, but it's by actually understanding what's inside all of those other layers. So hence this notion of thinking about your thinking, all right? Now, to do well in the personal learning statements, what I need you to do is I need you to show me a whole range of reflection processes. So if we think about, this first question that I've got you looking at, to what extent do you recognize an entrepreneurial self in your everyday behaviors? You've got free rein to interpret what an entrepreneurial self is. You're entitled to view that from your own perspective, right? But whichever way you go, to get a pass, as you can see on the rubric here, to get a pass, you just need to tell me, that there's some evidence of new learning that you've been able to make from being involved in the unit, all right? And maybe there's a bit of evidence of your reflection on who you are or something like that, right? That's a pass. But if you wanted to get beyond a pass to a credit, then you'd need to give me evidence of the thoughts about or challenges to your beliefs, your attitudes and of yourself and to others. So now you're starting to recognize who you are and why you have beliefs and the extent to which this process is challenging them. Maybe there's some evidence of self-projection into the experiences of others and or yourself. So now you're starting to think about, what do I do at work? What do I do in society? What does my brother or sister do? What do my friends do? And then there's this sensitivity towards the beliefs and values of other people and or tolerances of differences. So now we're starting to understand the world through other people's eyes, right? And you're starting to understand why your way of viewing something may be different. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just different. But are you tolerant of that? And do you understand that? But let's say you want to get to a distinction, okay? So you've done that so far to get to credit level, but to get this distinction level, I'm looking for your ability to evidence of the application of learning to real personal and professional life contexts. Evidence of engagement with other sources of stimulation to challenge your prior thinking. So it's like, did you go off and have some conversations with people about these topics? Did you actually go off and say, hey, what do you think about this? Have you ever thought about me being entrepreneurial? Where have you seen me acting in such a way where I've been resourceful, right? Or where I've used some initiative, right? Or where I've had a bit of leadership, or where I've managed some risk, right? Or where I've just done something different to the way other people do it. And to what extent, can you draw upon some sort of evidence or some examples from your personal and professional life to show that, okay? And then finally, let's say you're really keen on getting a higher distinction, okay? So now we want evidence of the learning process, this process, the one that you're engaged in doing this reflection. We want you to think about referencing what learning has occurred, how it's occurred, and how new insights have altered accepted patterns of thinking. So what does that mean? If you step back from this reflection process and you look at what you've said, what does it tell you about you as a learner? How do you typically learn? How do you like to learn? And if you can recognize that, what might this tell us about you as a learner? All right? So as I mentioned, you can organize the nature of this answer that you're going to provide, this reflection, across 7 questions. I don't want you to answer the 7 questions. I don't want to see these headings in your work. We don't need to do that. These are just the questions that need to be answered throughout your response, okay? So I'm interested to know what you've learnt that's new, right, in relation to your entrepreneurial self. I'm interested to know, how does this relate to your values as you recognize them? I'm interested to know, how have your beliefs or values been challenged by you thinking about your entrepreneurial self? I'm interested to know, where is your life experience in this process? I'm interested to know, where is your appreciation of others? I'm interested to know, what new sources of information have you engaged with? Yeah, you saw Mickey the surfer as a video. You've seen the entrepreneurs who visited the class. You've talked with other people in the class. Maybe you've now gone away and talked to other people in your family or at work or in other places. Maybe you've watched other things online. Maybe you've read something. So how do those information sources help you to make sense of you and your entrepreneurial self? And lastly, as a result of going through those areas of focus and trying to address those questions, what have you learned about yourself as a learner? And what are the implications of you learning or becoming aware of this? What might it mean for you in the future? So, in a really rough sense, right, and I do mean that literally, or quite a rough sense, I'm just trying to give you a bit of a sense for what the style of this writing might look like, right? I've left out all the bits that would actually be the substance, and these are really more the framing sorts of sentences that I would expect to be seeing, you know. So when you're dealing with this, what's new, what have you learned that's new, I might be expecting you to start with something like, when I think about myself as an entrepreneur, the weekend has prompted several new thoughts, which are blah, 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 blah. Therefore, instead of assuming entrepreneurs are something, 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 I can see my connection in the following ways. Blah, 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 blah. Seeing the students combined with exposure to other discussions has led me to sensing blah, 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 blah. So now I get a sense of what it actually is that's new about the way that you're actually thinking. So how does this relate to your values? Now I actually want you to go deep inside. And you don't have to tell me everything, right? You get to choose what I see and what I don't see. So I want you to be vulnerable at one level, but you don't have to go anywhere that you're really uncomfortable with, right? But I might expect to see something along the lines of, when I reflect on my normal disposition towards X, Y, and Z, it makes me very aware of the values I hold. Those being this, that, and the other. So I can see why it is natural for me to see such and such in this type of context or in this certain way, and this and that in a specific way, yeah? This is all related to my past, where I was doing this or understanding this, where I was always encouraged to believe or see blah, blah, blah. Okay? So now I've got a real sense for who you are and how you operate and why you see the world the way you see it, right? Maybe this is something that you would normally do on a day-to-day basis, and therefore you're going to have to stop and really think through, who are you and why do you do what you do, yeah? Now, I'm interested to know the sense to which these beliefs or values have been challenged. So I might expect to see something along the lines of, nevertheless, the weekend and my subsequent reflections of my entrepreneurial self have led me to challenge this, that, and something else. This makes me feel happy, sad, confused, excited. It makes me ask these questions and to revisit past assumptions that I rarely question. in relation to your life experience in this process, I might expect to see something like, when I now consider my recent past experiences in school, sport, work, family, I can see that I have a tendency to behave, think in a certain way. In those contexts, perhaps other factors also have an influence, are ignored, whatever the case may be. Nevertheless, I can see that I have tended to behave, think in a certain way. I'm really interested to know the extent to which you understand or have a sense of other people's thinking and feeling, right? So interacting with my group mates on the weekend also showed me how my approach, feelings, thoughts were blah, 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 blah. This was useful as it made me realize that X, Y, and Z. In terms of the new information sources, and you could have dealt with this one earlier in the piece. You might have put it up there right at the very beginning, but nevertheless, these are in no specific order other than the first question and maybe the last question. Until I saw I didn't realize that as a result of interacting with, I can now see that there are other ways to, and so this has enabled me to X, Y, and Z. Okay? Hopefully getting the sense of, how this narrative is going to flow, and for me to get a sense of your reflection. And then finally, having done that process of reflection, I want you to step right back from it and look at what it actually is you've said. And so I might expect to see something along the lines of, in summary, when I step back from these reflections, I can see that as a learner, I tend to something, something, and something. Therefore, I need to be mindful of my tendency to do this and to do that, to ensure in future situations I do not commit this, do that. Doing this will help me as a learner by ensuring I X, Y, and Z. And that's it, all right? That's the actual process. So let me reiterate. I'm not looking for any of these questions to appear in your actual reflections, okay? You might say from this top, so what have I learnt that's new? You might ask yourself that question, and you might say, so when I think about how this relates to my values, and you might say, I can see how my beliefs and values have been challenged, and you might tell me, I got life experience that I can actually bring into this conversation. And you might say, when I think about how others feel or think in this place, and you might also say, as a result of engaging with these new sources of information, but I'm not looking for you to actually give me an answer that's structured through 7 questions. I just want you to reflect on the initial question, which is about your entrepreneurial self, okay? To what extent do you recognize an entrepreneurial self in your everyday behaviors? You remember when we asked that question in the class, how many entrepreneurs are here? And all of a sudden we had 5 or 6 out of 300. But then when we said, if we thought about it via cooking, or if we thought about it via sport, wow, the population of entrepreneurs went up a lot, all right? And that's just 2 different domains we could think. We could think about it in different ways as well. Are you an entrepreneurial student, right? Yeah. Are you an entrepreneurial child at home in the eyes of your parents, right? Lots of different ways we could actually think this through. So I hope that helps you to think about you organizing your answer to this question, and just use these 7 questions as a guide for you being able to audit your own answer. Have in your answer, however it's written, have you addressed these 7 issues, these 7 questions? And if you've done that, then for me, you've followed the process, and by following the process, you'll be rewarded by the marks. Good luck. I look forward to reading your reflections.